My name is Dr. Greg Williams. I have worked with Independence Science now since 2012. And today what we're going to be talking about is the SciVoice Talking Logger Pro. So first I'll introduce kind of how the components of that work together, and then we'll dive into the details of how it all works. So Logger Pro is a data collection and analysis software package that is made by Vernier Software and Technology. And we have developed a set of JAWS scripts to make Logger Pro accessible with JAWS. So those two pieces together then form what we call SciVoice Talking Logger Pro. And Logger Pro runs on Windows. So unlike the Talking Labquest yesterday, the sensors, most of the sensors from Vernier do not plug directly into a computer. Now, there are some sensors that are USB, have USB connections, and those you can use directly with Logger Pro. Others, such as the temperature sensor and most of the ones that you would be familiar with, you have to have an interface between the computer and the sensor. So there's Vernier sells something called a GoLink, which is just a USB to the BT cable connection converter, or you can use a Labquest and connect sensors through the Labquest and the Labquest to the computer, or there's also something called a Lab Pro, which again allows you to connect multiple sensors to the computer through one USB port. At the moment, what I have up is, actually I'm going to close, I have Logger Pro started, but I'm going to close it and just start it from scratch.
Alt F4, SCM.
Okay, so we'll go to desktop.
Windows D, folder view, list view, Logger Pro 3.15 English.
Okay, so I'm running Logger Pro 3.15, and I'll hit enter on it.
Enter. Not collected.
Okay, so when it comes up and says not collecting, that tells me that the scripts, the JAWS scripts, are working correctly. If you start Logger Pro and you have the scripts installed but don't hear not collecting, then there may be an issue. And the other way to check it is, so there are two methods for doing all of the script commands. The one I will show you is the command, or the version that you use Control-Shift and then shortcut keys. There's a command layer which we can go into in a little bit. So Control-Shift-S will check for sensors. So if I hit Control-Shift-S.
Not collecting, no sensors found.
Okay, so you hear not collecting, no sensors found. If the scripts were not running, you would not hear that. So when Logger Pro opens, what we have is the data table.
Edit hypertext.
Well, actually, let's see. So let's explore. So to switch between the pages or the objects on the screen in Logger Pro, you use Control Tab and Control Shift Tab. So I'll hit Control Tab.
Dataset Y, empty cell, edit hypertext.
Okay.
Row 2, dataset X, empty cell, edit escape. Table
Okay.
2 columns.
Let's see. So let's do this again. Control Tab.
Cartesian graph, dataset Y versus X.
Okay, so Cartesian graph, dataset Y versus X. In other words, there's no sensors, so it's just a generic empty graph.
Table with 2 columns and 1 row. Row 2, column 1, dataset X, empty cell.
Okay, and this is an empty data table. So that's what comes up by default. So let's go ahead and connect. So I'm going to connect through the Labquest. Now this is always the hairiest bit of the process, is making sure that the Labquest is detected by Logger Pro. So hopefully the technology winds are favorable today. And let's see what it says.
Not collecting, no sensors found.
Okay, let's plug a sensor into the Labquest and see if it picks it up. So right now I'm going to plug a temperature sensor into the Labquest and check it. Again, okay, so that tells me that it did not pick it up. Let's unplug the sensor from the Labquest, reconnect the USB cable, and bring it back.
Timeline stop in Labquest version 2.
And there we go.
Please wait. Labquest application. Sensor page. Defense box.
Logger row dash untitled left parent not responding right parent. Logger row dash untitled table with 2 columns and 1.
Okay, now let's check and see what we have.
Not collected. No sensors found.
Okay, let's plug the temperature probe in and see. We will use the Go link.
Logger row dash untitled table with 2 columns and 1 rows. No cell selected.
Okay, so I've plugged the Go link into the computer's USB port. Now I'm plugging the temperature sensor into the Go link.
Not collected. 1 sensor found. Temperature.
Okay, so now it says not collecting when I hit Control-Shift-F. It says not collecting 1 sensor found temperature. So it tells me that I've got a temperature sensor. So now I'm going to, let me just show you now how Logger Pro's screen has changed. So I'm going to hit Control-Tab.
Table with 2 columns and 1 rows. No cell selected.
Okay, so there's still an empty data table.
Digital meter temperature 23.2 degrees C, 23.1 degrees C.
Okay, so this is a digital meter.
Cartesian graph, latest temp.
So the digital meter is what is showing the live readout from the temperature sensor. And if I leave focus on the temperature or on the digital meter, every time the temperature changes, it will announce that to me. So if I just switch back quickly.
Digital meter temperature 22.4 degrees C, 22.3 degrees C.
Okay, and if we wait.
22.2 degrees C.
Okay, so it's going down. All right, so let's switch back to the graph.
Cartesian graph, latest temperature versus time.
Okay, so now that graph is marked as latest temperature versus time. So it is detecting the sensor and has labeled the axes accordingly. The important keystrokes to know to start with, in order to check the sensor, so I've got 1 sensor, if I hit Control-Shift-1, it will read me the current readout for the sensor.
Temperature equals 21.7 degrees C.
And that's degrees Celsius. Now, if I had a second sensor, I could hit Control-Shift-2 and it would read that one. Let's see what happens if I hit it.
Only 1 sensor was found.
Okay, so it's telling me there is no second sensor. Now, if I want to have the temperature read out every, let's say, 10 seconds, I can hit Control-Shift-1 twice.
Automatic announcement of sensors dialog. Please enter in seconds. How often to announce sensor readings? Seconds may contain 1 decimal place. E.G 2.5 for every 2.5 seconds. Edit type of text.
Okay, so if I type in 10 seconds.
1, 0. Enter. Automatic announcement of temperature activated. 21.2. Cartesian graph. Latest temperature versus time.
So now if we just wait 10 seconds, it will announce it again.
21.1.
Now notice there, it just gives the number. It does not give the units. And so if I had multiple sensors connected, let me go ahead. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-1 twice again to disable automatic announcements.
Automatic announcement of temperature canceled.
Okay, so if you have 2 sensors connected, what will happen is it will read them. They both have to be set to the same interval. So I can't have the first one read at 5 seconds and the second one read at 10. They have to be set to the same interval. And it will read out the first sensor followed by the number from the second sensor. So you just have to know by the order the numbers are read, which one is being read out, since it doesn't give you units. Now, if you're ever curious though, you can use Control-Shift-1 or Control-Shift-2, and it will read both the number and the units. To navigate around, we can use Alt-F to open the file menu.
Alt-F menu, file menu, new Control+N to navigate, press up or down arrow, N.
And then your standard menu navigation works. So if I arrow over, we have
menu bar, menu, edit menu, can undo Control plus menu bar, menu, experiment menu, start collection, less space greater C.
So there's experiment,
menu bar, menu, data menu,
data,
menu bar, menu, analyze menu, replay,
analyze,
menu bar, menu, insert menu, graph, options menu, graph options, dot.
Okay, and so we'll deal with those later. But let's, for the moment,
escape menu bar, options to navigate. Escape, leaving menu bar, Cartesian.
Get back out to the main screen. So now to collect data, you can hit the space bar, but that occasionally is finicky. So the safest way to do it is to use Control-Shift-C for collect, and then hitting Control-Shift-C again will stop the collection. But let's say I want to have it collect for a minute. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'll go into the menu. So I'll hit Alt F to bring up the file menu.
Alt F, menu.
And then I'll arrow over.
Menu bar, menu, experiment menu, start collection, less space greater, C.
Okay, so I'm in the experiment menu and I'm just going to arrow down.
Store latest run, control, clear latest run, unavailable, keep control plus K unavailable, mark data D unavailable, tag data D, T. Extend collection left parent 270, yes right parent control plus T, T.
Okay, so if I want to make my collection longer, I can do that.
Connect interface submenu, I.
So now this is
Remove interface submenu, E.
connect interface, remove interface. That's if I want to add sensors that are connected through either a Lab Pro or a Labquest.
Set up sensor submenu.
And when I reconnect the Labquest later, if it doesn't detect it, then I can go into these menus and try to make it work. But for now, let's just keep going.
Online interface submenu. Data collection control plus D, D.
Okay, so I'm going to hit open up data collection.
Enter leaving menus. Data collection dialog. Collection page. Mode colon combo box. Time based 1 to 5.
So here I can set up all of the parameters for the data I want to collect. This first one is mode, and I'm going to leave it on time based. That means it just collects based on how much time has elapsed. If I were doing, say, a titration with a pH meter and a drop counter, then what it would do is it would collect data every time a drop went through and triggered the drop counter. So that would be called event based. And there's a couple of other options. So I'm just going to tab.
Duration colon edit 180. Type of text. Duration colon combo box. Seconds.
Okay, so that tells me it's 180 seconds. So I'm going to change this to be a minute.
Duration colon edit 180. Type of text.
So
plus D.
just
60. Duration colon edit 60. Type
all
of
right,
text.
so we've got that set to 60.
Duration colon combo box. Repeat checkbox not checked. Sample of time 0 checkbox checked. So clear.
Okay, so that means we want a sample collected immediately when we start.
Continuous data collection check. Edit 2. Type of text. Alt plus F. Sampling rate colon. Sample slash second. Edit 0.5. Type of text. Alt plus P.
Okay, so it's
Edit 2. Type of text. Alt plus S.
So it's 2 samples per second, which means that it samples, if I tab over to the next one,
Sampling rate colon. Sample slash second. Edit 0.5. Type of text.
0.5. So it's a sample every 0.5 seconds.
Over sampling checkbox. The button to activate.
Okay,
Press space
so
bar.
we'll go ahead and hit space.
Space. Cartesian graph. Later.
All right, so now all I'm going to do is put the temperature probe against my body and start collecting data. So here we go. Oh, hold on. Before I do that, let me start live announcements so we can hear as I'm collecting. So we'll hit Control-Shift-1 twice.
Temp automatic announcement of temperature activated 20.6.
Okay, so now it's going to do it every 10 seconds. So I'm going to start data collection.
Starting collection. Collection in progress 20.7.
So that beep tells you that it is started. Okay, so it's going up, which is good.
$29.3. $31.4.
And in a couple readings, it should stop.
32.7. 33.5. Not collecting 34.1.
Okay, so now that beep and it said not collecting, so our data collection has ended. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the live announcements again.
Temp automatic announcement of temperature.
Or automatic announcements is what they call it. Okay, so now visually there is a nice Cartesian graph here on our page. I'm going to though Alt tab or Control tab.
Table with 2 columns and 121 rows. No step.
Okay, so we collected data for 60 seconds at 2 samples a second, so we have 121 samples. So it starts us up at the top of the table. Now if I hit down arrow.
Row 1, latest time left parent as right parent 0.0.
Okay, so it read me latest time and then in seconds, and then it gave me the value 0.0. Now then, if I arrow to the right.
temperature left parent degrees C right parent 20.7.
Okay, so the way that this table is set up to read is if I arrow between columns, it will read me the column header followed by the value in that particular cell. If I continue up or down with the down arrow keys, it goes up or down that column and only reads the row number and value. So let's just go down. I'm in the temperature at the moment, so let's go down.
Row 2, 20.7. Row 3, 20.7. Row 4, 20.7. Row 5, 20.8.
Okay, and I can use control page down. We'll skip down by 20 rows.
Alert, Lord Weber has left the meeting. Row 26, 26.6.
Or I can skip up, again with control page up.
Row 6, 21.0. Row 7, latest time left parent as right parent 3.0.
Okay, now that's fine. I can very slowly find what I need, but what we generally want to find is the maximum, the minimum, etc. So
Alert, Lord Weber has joined them.
if I go to back into the menus, so Alt F,
Alt F, menu, file menu.
and I'm going to go over to Analyze.
Menu, bar, menu, data menu, insert menu,
Oops,
analyze
too far.
menu, replay,
Okay, and then arrow down.
replay, examine, interpolate, tangent, T, integral, N, peak integration, statistics, S.
So there is a menu item here called Statistics, and I'm going to hit Enter.
Enter, leaving menus, statistics for colon latest temperature.
All right, so now it said Statistics for latest temperature. So if I want to find out which object on the page, so the graph, the table, the digital meter, now this statistics box, what I'm focused on, if I hit JAWS key tab,
Statistics for colon latest temperature.
okay, so that tells me I'm focused on that object. Now, if I want to be able to read what's there, well, at the moment, the arrow keys don't do anything, but if I hit JAWS key tab twice,
Statistics for colon latest temperature min colon 20.69 at 0 max colon 34.08 at 6.
so what it has done is it's brought up in a virtual viewer, like JAWS does for a lot of things, the content of this object. So I can start up at the top.
Max colon 34.
So if I go Control Home, take
Statistics
me up to the top.
min colon.
So now I can use all the standard reading navigation keys that you're used to.
Statistics for colon latest temperature min colon 20.69 at 0.
Okay, so it tells me the minimum was at 0, at 20.69 degrees.
Max colon 34.08 at 60.00.
Okay, so at the end I was at my maximum, so it's 30 point.
Max colon 34.08.
34.0 degrees. Okay, which my temperature went up. That's good. Last night when I was practicing or working with this to check everything, I apparently hadn't eaten and was cold. And when I put it in my hand, my temperature went down instead of up. But fortunately today, I'm a normal human being.
Mean colon 29.83.
And so it gives you your minimum, your maximum, your mean,
Median colon 31.23.
median.
STD dev colon 3 samples colon 121 del blank.
So most of the statistics that you typically want in an experiment. Now I can hit escape to get out of this virtual viewer.
Escape. Blank.
Again, that graph
Table with 2 digital meter temperature. Cartesian graph latest
is nice visually, but that doesn't, if you can't see it, it doesn't help a lot. However, Vernier worked with us to build in some accessibility features into Logger Pro. So if I go to the File menu again,
Alt F menu file menu.
and now I'm going to arrow up because I know it's at near the bottom of the menu.
Exit Alt plus F4. Data sharing ... Accessibility submenu Y.
So we have an accessibility submenu. So if I open this up with right arrow,
Settings ... S.
okay, I'm just going to open up the settings dialog.
Enter. Leaving menus. Accessibility settings dialog. Audio graph trace colon. Playback length colon. Combo box 10. 4 of 9. The change listen.
Okay, so what this is telling me is the Logger Pro has built in an audio graph trace. So this is the specification for how long it takes to play that graph. So it's going to take 10 seconds.
Audio graph trace colon. Quote pop quote on graph grid lines. Checkbox checked.
Okay, so it will make a subtle pop when it goes across grid lines on the x-axis. So that will give you some idea of how far along you've gone. Now, again, that's not going to be quantitative unless you know where the grid lines are, but it gives you an idea of progress across the graph.
Traces/fits to play : latest vertical bar temperature checkbox checked.
Okay, so here is the different graphs I can place. So if I had more than one sensor or more than one graph going shown, then I would be able to choose which of the graphs I wanted.
Audio graph trace : start playback button to activate, press spacebar.
Okay, so now I'm going to start playback because I want to show a feature that you, or an issue that you need to keep in mind. So we'll start it.
Space. Cartesian graph, latest temperature.
Okay, and so what you hear there is it goes up in a relatively smooth fashion. So the lower the pitch, the lower the value, and the higher the pitch, obviously, the higher the value it corresponds to. Now, in this graph, it doesn't matter so much, but oftentimes we want to auto scale the graph so that the graph fills the page. So that auto scale is Control J is the shortcut.
Control J, 20, 35.
Okay, I'm on the graph. Let me just show you what happens if I bring up the object information for the graph. So I'm going to hit JAWS key tab twice.
Cartesian graph X goes from 0 to 60, Y goes from 20 to 35, plug 1 : X is latest time left parent, S right parent, Y is latest temperature left parent, degrees Z right parent, press escape to close this message. Okay, so it tells me what the range on the x-axis is, what the range on the y-axis is, and what the axes labels are. So that's very helpful if I'm trying to figure out, you know, kind of how my data is, what my data ranges are. Escape.
So we're back to the graph. Now, if I want to get rid of the statistics box.
Statistics for : latest temperature.
Okay, so I can hit, again, I can just hit delete on this and it will remove it.
Blank.
So now all I have are
table with 2 columns and 1
the data table.
Digital meter temperature, 20.1 degrees C.
Temperature.
Cartesian graph, latest temperature versus time.
And the graph. Now, if I want to find out about all of the objects, actually, if you hit JAWS key F1, so what you would normally hit for kind of JAWS sensitive help.
This is the data window, page 1 of 1. This page contains 3 objects, : object 1, : Cartesian graph X goes from 0 to 60, Y goes from 22. Okay, so this brings up the information for all of the objects on the page and helps you quickly summarize what's going on. Now, another feature which Vernier worked with us and View Plus to do is if I go back to the File menu menu
and arrow back up to Accessibility.
Exit, data share, accessibility, settings, S, embossing options, O.
Okay, so there are embossing options. Now, I don't have an embosser attached, a Tiger embosser. So this works with the Tiger embosser line. And so if I hit enter on here.
Enter, leaving menus. Embossing options dialog, font, cancel button to active.
So what it brings up, and it would have more options if I actually had an embosser attached, but
okay, button. Scale factor edit combo, Braille 29 ASCII 154 572.
So I can choose the Braille font I want.
Scale factor edit 4, type of text.
I can choose a scale factor, and the scale factor has to do with getting the Braille labels to fit well on the graph, and occasionally you have to play with that.
Always show this dialog, check the help button to activate.
But if you have a Tiger embosser,
space,
you can directly emboss the graph from Logger Pro onto the Tiger embosser. And actually, if you go into so let me show you. I quickly went past it, and you may not have heard it.
Exit, data share, accessibility, settings, S. Embossing up. Enter, leaving menus, embossing up.
So if I tab over here,
help button to
just there, just before the cancel button, is a help button.
Help button.
And if I press that, it will bring up the Logger Pro help.
Enter, Logger Pro 3, type in the keyword to find : edit.
And then I can use F6 to switch.
F6, document. Page has 17 headings and 7 links. Accessibility for visually impaired users. Heading level accessibility.
And so within the Logger Pro help is an accessibility section that details all of the audio trace information and the embosser options, etc.
Alt F4, embossing option.
Now, let me show you what happens I'm going to close Logger Pro with this data. Oh, sorry. The other option you do have, well, no, I'll show you that in a second. Let me close this out.
Alt F4, Embossing Options dialog. Escape, Logger Pro dash untitled. Alt F4. JAWS version 2000, meeting controls, Zoom, physics.
Okay, so now what I have are, I'm in a folder of sample files, sample data files that Vernier supplies with Logger Pro.
Radiation, simple harmonic motion.cmv.
So I'm going to open up a simple harmonic motion.
Enter. Logger Pro dash untitled 10%. Sensor confirmation dial alert. Tallest pressure has left the meeting. Title is Logger Pro dash simple harmonic motion.cmvl sensor confirmation. Scan for WDSS button. Help button. To continue without data collection button. To activate, press space bar.
So I'm going to continue without data collection.
Space. Page 1 of 2 graphs. No object selected. Cartesian graph. Latest velocity versus time.
So here what I have are 3 graphs of velocity versus time, position versus time, and acceleration versus time. And I'm going to use Control J to scale these graphs.
Control J to 0.18. Cartesian graph. Control J minus 1.6. 1.6. Text in this experiment. Cartesian graph. Latest. Control J 0.58.
Okay. Now, if I go back again to the audio trace.
Alt F menu, file with exit, data shift, accessibility, settings, enter, leaving menus, accessibility.
So now, if I arrow over, or tab over.
Audio, traces slash fits to play colon, latest vertical bar velocity, left paragraph to right parent, checkbox, checked.
So I have check boxes for each
traces slash fits to play colon, latest vertical bar acceleration, left paragraph, 3 right parent, check.
Of the 3 graphs. So I'm going to play all 3 of them, and so what it will do is it will play them in the order they happen to be on the, they appear on the screen. So it'll be position versus time, velocity versus time, and acceleration versus time.
Audio graph trace colon, start playback, button to add space, Cartesian graph, latest position versus time.
And unfortunately, over Zoom, I doubt that you can hear the pops. But so if I just opened this up and didn't know what was on the screen, and I played those graphs, it would very quickly tell me that there's some sort of sinusoidal graphs, and I could pull up information on them if I wanted to. But if I needed to actually be able to access the data, again here, it's somebody else's supplied data and it's in the form of a graph. But I can export under the file menu, there's an export option, and I can export it to a CSV file, which could then be opened in Excel if I needed to actually access the data when all that I was being shown was a table in Logger Pro. Now I will say pretty much all of the features in Logger Pro are accessible. There are a few instances where there are boxes that are not labeled, some select boxes that don't have the options labeled correctly. But for the most part, everything within the application is accessible. So you can do, for instance, if I go under, let's see, let me switch to
Cartesian graph, latest velocity versus.
Let's do velocity versus time. So if I go under File menu,
edit menu, menu bar, data menu, data browser, B.
And
analyze menu, replay
let's go under Analyze.
Replay latest, examine control plus interpolate R, tangent T, integral N, peak integration A, statistics S.
So you can do an integral of the graph if you needed that information for some reason.
Linear fit L.
You can do a linear fit.
Curve fit C. Model F.
I'm just going to try curve fit here and let's see what we can do.
Curve fit enter, leaving menus, curve fit dialog, proportional linear quadratic cubic coordinate quintic, graph button to act, zoom in button to act, zoom out button, auto scale button to act, general equation colon, at radio button, checked 1 of 6, to change the select, general equation colon, MT plus B, radio, general equation colon, a star T caret 2 plus BT plus C, radio button, checked.
Okay, so here we have different curves that we can try to fit to if we needed to find out, do a curve fit for our experiment.
General equation colon a plus b t plus c star. General equation colon a plus b. General equation colon a plus bt plus c star t caret 2 plus d star t caret 3 plus e star t caret 4 plus f. General equation colon a star t caret b. Radio button checked 6 of 6 to change the selection. General equation colon a star t caret n. Radio button checked 6 of 6 to general equation colon a slash t. Radio button checked. General equation colon a slash t caret. General equation colon a slash t caret n plus b. Radio. General equation colon a star x left parent dash c star t right parent plus b. Radio button. General equation colon a star ln left. And
so what you can hear there is there's all sorts of curve options to fit. So you had the polynomials, there's exponentials, logarithms, etc. And so you can go ahead and pick one, and it will actually give you the fit parameters, etc. So the nice thing about having the SciVoice Talking LabQuest in combination with SciVoice Talking Logger Pro is the SciVoice Talking LabQuest gives you the flexibility to do data collection without being encumbered by a computer, etc. It's a lot more portable. But then if you need to do data analysis on your data, you can export the data from the LabQuest to Logger Pro, and then within Logger Pro you have many more options for doing data analysis than you do on the LabQuest. Thank you very much for attending, and I hope if you have any questions you can feel free to reach out to me at gwilliams@independencescience.com. That's INDEPENDENCESCIENCE.com, or you can call us at 866-862-9665, and I am extension 3. And thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Ashley.
All right, well, thank you everyone for coming today, and if you have no further questions, we thank you for coming, and we invite you to follow us on our Twitter and Instagram pages, as well as joining our newsletter. And if you have any suggestions that you'd like to see in future webinars, please feel free to let us know. Thank you and have a great day.